Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and this is the Elgato Facecam Pro, which is an insanely expensive but wonderfully premium facecam, which, as you can see, is a huge chunky beast. I put it on top of my Surface Book because I wanted to demonstrate just how huge it is, and you'll see more shots of it as we go through later on. But this is an interesting webcam that includes 4K 60Hz refresh rate capture. It has a number of other highlights to it as well. It's got Elgato's autofocus lens in it, as well as a Sony Starvis sensor. It's got an f2.0 aperture to it, and it has variable autofocus and loads of other things that I'll show you later on in the software. I'm using it right now, which is why I'm appearing in the video, and I want to talk about the tweaks that you can do to it with Elgato's camera hub and more. But for the moment, I'm going to unbox it and show you what's included in the box and what you can do with it. Now, it comes with a chunky and quite long USB-C to USB-C cable. You do need a USB-C connection to make the most of it. Elgato says that you can get adapters, but they don't include one, where you could convert it from USB-C to USB-A and use it on your PC, and they've said it works. I haven't been able to test it because I don't have one of those, unfortunately. So just bear that in mind. If you are buying it, you will need a USB-C port on your PC for maximum easy use. It plugs in at the rear and then obviously runs over to your PC. You'll notice it doesn't come with a stand or anything, but it does have a mount to put it on top of your monitor, obviously important. And I actually found that that was much better than I thought it would be, because as you can see, comparing it to my squashy banana, it's quite a chunky beast and it's quite hefty. And that's because it's got a lot of good quality tech packed inside there. It's designed to work really well and to deliver really good quality video capture. And as you can see, it makes you look pretty good, although it does require quite a bit of tweaking in order to get right. So we'll talk about that later on as well. And there are some complaints with autofocus that you might spy as we go through, so I just want to talk about that. But at a basic level, fairly straightforward what you get in the box. Obviously, you've got the webcam itself, a clip to put it on top of your monitor, and then the cable to connect to your PC. And it's relatively plug and play. You can just use it immediately with OBS, but it definitely is better if you download the Camera Hub app and tweak things in there and then pull that into OBS, and I'll talk more about that later on. But you can see it's got a standard thread on it, so it will easily set up with the stand that's included to go on top of your monitor, but you can also use it with other things. So this will happily work with your standard tripod, for example, and other things that you may have. So you can mount it in different positions with relative ease as well, so whatever you're using it for. Now, this is mostly aimed at streamers and content creators like myself and people that want to have a good quality camera. The highlights that they suggest is you have a large sensor area, it's got a really good autofocus setting on it, also insanely wide, but can cope with focusing on things that are at distance. So whether you're close up doing a face to camera sort of chat like I am now, or you want to move around the room a bit more and do something perhaps in the back of the room, you have that option and it will still work. As you can see, it will mount onto standard tripod mounting. So you can see I'm using a Manfrotto mount here for a camera mounting system. So you can set that up and just put that on a tripod instead, so you can set it up in a space. So if you're looking to move this and use it in other places, you can do that. And the cable's actually fairly long. You might want to invest in a longer one depending on where you're going to be putting it, but it's something to bear in mind. I actually didn't think it was too bad, but you can see loads of different options here. I'm just showing off. I've got a small rig mount, for example, which is really affordable that you can put it to, and then you can clamp it to something is one of the options as well. So I thought maybe I might use it for some top-down shots as an alternative. Be useful for streaming if I start streaming unboxings, for example, which I'm thinking about doing on Twitch, so go follow over there if you're not already. You can basically just position that down. At the same time I'm using my main camera for recording, you could then just live stream with that. Now, it doesn't have a microphone on it, which is probably fine because most people won't use a webcam microphone nowadays anyway. You can have a decent microphone, right? Especially post-COVID era, you're going to want good quality out of it. And so putting a mic in there it wouldn't be worth it. So you've got a really chunky camera, which again I'm showing off on a tiny laptop just to demonstrate how big it is. But I was surprised that this didn't cause problems, because it is quite big and it is quite heavy, but as you can see, it does actually sit on there okay. It doesn't topple off, so that's standard mounting that you've got brackets nicely onto there. I've also used it on a curved monitor and on a super thin Corsair Xenon monitor as well, which is really thin, so it will handle even the thinnest of monitors with no problems, which I was surprised by because it is a bit of a beast, as you can see from multiple different angles. But that does result in really good quality capture. And now I'm going to demonstrate what you need to do in the software and the tweaks in order to get it right and how to pull it into OBS. There are some other highlights as well, so stick around for those because you can use it with a Stream Deck. So watch and see how that goes. So I'm going to kickstart this demo with what the camera looks like straight out of the box, plugged in and recording with OBS. So I've literally just added the camera as a source. I haven't changed any of the settings. I've reset it all to default. And I want to demonstrate a few things now. I look a bit more pasty than usual and than I did a second ago. And everything looks a little bit washed out, but there are some highlights. You can see just sort of how wide this view is. I'll leave all the specs in the description, but when I was using it on the 45-inch monitor that I was testing out from Elgato, I realized I could see basically the entirety of my room. You can see all the chaos that's going on behind me. I need to do some tidying, so I apologize for that, but there's a lot of stuff going on back here, but you can see just how much sort of space you have. To move around in. So it gives you a massive view, and it's got decent focus. So if I stand back over here, or if you get really close. So it's got a good range of setup there that you can go between. However, I want to show what you can do in the software. So now here I am in Elgato's Camera Hub, and I'd highly recommend downloading this because it has a number of tweaks that you can do to it, including all sorts of things that you'll see on the left-hand side here. So you'll see, for example, that we can zoom right in immediately if you want to. I wouldn't recommend zooming that far in on my face. But you can also do things so you can set presets. So you could set a preset of a specific zone. And you can go between those, depending on what you like and where you want it and how you're going to be positioning it. Because obviously I'm not going to want to show all this. I don't want that in there normally. So I'd probably crop it down, but you could still zoom in and maintain some of the quality. Now, there are other things to play around with in here to make it look better, in my mind, and it does require some tweaking. I think default, it just looks a bit washed out, but that's fine because you can like add a little bit of saturation to it, maybe make the contrast a bit stronger. You see now the blacks are a bit darker. My shirt looks a bit more like it actually does in the real world. The blue wall behind me is now a little bit darker. The difference between it is better. You can also change the exposure, so we can adjust the compensation, so you could change that. And this is obviously going to vary depending on your lighting, but you can see just a little drop in the compensation on the exposure, and you can change that. You can go through all sorts of other settings. You can adjust the white balance, so you could set it to what your lights are set to, which I need to check. So I've got the key lights, and they are currently set to, get that update later, 5,900 Kelvin. That one's a little bit warmer, so we can change that, and then you can get your camera to match that, and then you'll get a more natural tone. So if you know what your Kelvin is, you can change that on the camera settings really easily. Another thing I noticed is the anti-flicker settings go between 50 and 60 hertz, and that can make a difference. And then in the effects tab, you can also do other things. So you've got the usual sort of virtual backgrounds and things. And what you can do with this is you can set it up and apply the camera hub settings, and then you end up with a virtual source. So if you take OBS and then you go into your Facecam, you'll see that you have the option for Elgato Virtual Camera or Elgato Facecam Pro. So the Facecam Pro is like the default setting of what it would be, and then the virtual camera is with all those settings applied that I've just done. So although you could tweak it in OBS, you'd actually be better off tweaking it in the Elgato Facecam Hub and then adjusting it. So that is one thing to bear in mind. So another thing that you can do, obviously, is an Elgato product. So naturally, it's going to work with a Stream Deck. And you can see the Stream Deck Plus here. So I've set up a number of different buttons. that you can go through, and there are multiple settings in here that I'll show you in a second. But essentially what you can do is you can set up, so we've got background buttons here, for example, so I can press the background and switch to an office setting, press it again, it turns it back off, press that and it does blur. There's multiple different backgrounds that you can set, so you can make multiple different buttons for that. Now there's also, I've made a focus button, so it refocuses, so you can see it does some little focus peaking. And while I'm doing this, I want to talk about that is actually an issue. So the autofocus is pretty decent, but what I have noticed is that it does seem to do it quite regularly. I don't know how much you've spied that in this video, but sometimes if stuff's moving too much, or if I'm trying to get something in focus, the camera will readjust, or even if I'm just talking, the camera automatically readjusts, and it can be a bit disconcerting or distracting. That's not to say the focus isn't good, it's just that I think sometimes it goes a little bit over the top. But you might have that problem. There is also a focus button, so basically if you do have an issue, if you've got the Stream Deck, you can press it so it'll automatically focus, but again you get that wobble effect, which doesn't look great. Then we have the ability to add some dials on here, and that's the benefit of the Stream Deck Plus, because you can do things like this. So I can tweak the exposure compensation on the fly by just rolling the wheel. So if the light adjusts, so for example you can see it's 8 o'clock at night at the moment, it's going to start getting dark in the next couple of hours, and obviously then I'd need to maybe play around with my lighting and also adjust these things. Saturation is another thing, so you could just adjust the saturation, make it look like I've got a fierce Essex tan, so now orange. And then you can do other things, so we can zoom right in with this wheel. You can choose to zoom right in, and then you can just pan around. It's not very smooth, but you do have that option. Or alternatively, you can set up buttons that you can go to a particular level really quickly. So that is 236% zoom, and then back to 100, 236, 100. You can see each time it's doing that autofocus. So not ideal. You probably could try not having autofocus turned on. Let's see what happens. Center weighted. Yeah, that's better. Look now, so that's smoother. So that might be worth experimenting with. It's setting a distance that you want the focus to be. If it's doing a talking head, for example, you can work out what the distance is going to be. We've set it on automatic. It's said to focus at 22 centimeters. So if you turn off automatic, and now it's just going to be there. But obviously, now if we move into a different position, it's not going to follow us. But maybe that will get rid of that wobble. So I think the camera is fantastic. And there are a few tweaks that you can do to make it even better. But if you are already ingrained in the Elgato way, then it'll obviously be beneficial. So if you've got a Stream Deck, I just want to quickly show you what you can do and how you can set it up to get it working if you do get this camera. So open up your Stream Deck software. You'll see this is obviously with the Stream Deck Plus, but you can use anyone. Now, we first need to get a plugin. So you have to click on the little plus button up here. And then you want to search for Camera Hub. You can see Elgato Camera Hub. I've already got it installed, but make sure you install that. Once you do that, you'll then find that it appears in the list on the right-hand side here. So you can see you've got Camera Hub down here, for example. And then you can just drag and drop them in. So we've got set property. It goes onto the Elgato Camera Hub. And then you can pick something. So let's just say we want to do the zoom level, as I showed already. So you can set this now, you can set it at a percentage. So let's just do something insane, 367%. So now when I press the button, you've got 367% in there. 236, 100. Now you notice it's doing that focus thing again. So I'm just going to turn off autofocus. And now we can go through those different zoom levels. So maybe you've got a dramatic reaction camera. Dum dum dum. You obviously have the option to do that. We've got a refocus button and lots of other things. So there's change background is one of the other options you've already seen me do. So you can go through various different ones in here. For example, a room in the morning adds a kind of funky aesthetic to it, or you've got that office one that I showed you earlier. And if you click onto the dials section, you'll see obviously we have options in here as well. So I'll just delete those. You can see you've got adjust property. So adjust property instead, because obviously you're tweaking the dial. you're going to go through there and select something. So we could choose a focus level on the dial. So actually you can adjust the level of focus. So I said already that when it defaults to 22 centimeters, because it worked out how far I am, we can adjust the focus manually. So it's basically the same as adjusting a manual focus. So you see, I've now got it at 845 centimeters. So obviously a lot further away from the lens. And then we get back down to where it actually is. But this might actually pay to use this. So instead of using the autofocus, if you do notice that it's doing that focus peaking, or it's constantly trying to put it back in focus, you could use this dial to then just basically roll in and out of focus to make sure that you've got it set to the right level, or to adjust on the fly if you've moved ever so slightly and you notice that it's out of focus. Or you could just press that refocus button, but you would have that sort of peaking. You have these controls in here. You'll see I've got saturation, compensation, and then obviously the zoom levels as well for the manual zoom. So that can be changed. So you can change the implementation of that. So you'll see it's got a multiplier on it. So you could do ×5 zoom. So you could zoom in quite quickly. But again, it's not very smooth. So it doesn't look amazing in my mind, but plenty of options in there. Lots of buttons to play around with. Obviously great if you've already got a Stream Deck. And motorbikes keep going past my house. If you've enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and checking out the description for more related content. Let me know in the comments if you've got any questions. Thanks very much for watching.